Reid, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ben. Great to be here.
Yeah, we're having a little chuckle about it's been 12 months. I think I've been nagging you every time you've been back in the country or back in Sydney to get on the show.
Yeah. Sorry, it's taken a little bit of time, but it's been something I've wanted to do for ages. So thanks for following me up.
No, my pleasure, and it's definitely been something I've wanted to do for a long time. I think one thing, like my Salesforce kind of recruitment journey, kind of aligns to your time with Sqware Peg, then Simplus and Infosys, because I don't know if you know this, but I think you were one of our very first clients and a tough negotiator. I remember back then when we were negotiating terms.
Hopefully fair a little bit, but I think we did a bulk deal at that time with you and one Mr. David Bowker. And g'day, David, if you're listening. Killing it these days at CloudWorks. So that was awesome. And we're still all mates all these years later. And not only you guys, but other recruiters who've helped out along the way. Before we got our own recruiters, it's a big part of the ecosystem. And I'm sure a lot of people are grateful for what Talent Hub has done over the years. So, including me. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, look, we've got a lot to discuss today, and I think obviously we'll go through that journey I just mentioned, Sqware Peg, Simplus, Infosys. But I think a lot of people know you as someone that was the managing director and owner of Sqware Peg, and then so on. But not a lot of people will know necessarily what came before that. So, what was your career before Salesforce, and then how did you end up being the co-owner of Sqware Peg?
Yeah, I was corporate, so did business at uni, and then went into Telstra. Working for free one day a week during uni, and then got a job there. And that was super exciting. Telstra expanding internationally, and worked on India, which was a bit of a full circle because I worked, a lot with so many people over the years from the subcontinent in the Salesforce ecosystem. So it was great that culturally I had been to India sort of 12 times or so. And then, I became a bit of a turnaround specialist. So I had about 6 opportunities where I'd be given a division in a company or a particular area and told, this isn't in great shape. Can you please, help turn it around? So that became my thing. And I really enjoyed the breadth of general management. So worked in a whole bunch of different roles in Telstra, and then, back in pre.com days, worked in the Yellow Pages and doing M&A stuff there across Asia. Then jumped into the online world and, learned some tough lessons out of businesses that were dying. So I got dropped in to be CEO of the Trading Post, which was a buy and sell newspaper, which a lot of people listening to this probably wouldn't even know about. But it was the eBay and car sales at the time. And then I was going to jump out and do something a bit entrepreneurial, but the GFC hit. And then I ended up back in telco over at Optus. And I didn't think I was going to go back into telco, but that was amazing. And that's where I met Libby Adams. We worked together in the strategy team for the small medium business division that started, 2009, and then got into different roles across that division and ended up sort of in a matrix role leading the division at the end. And during that, that's where I, was a business sponsor for a big implementation of Salesforce. So that was the journey, life in corporate. And then I was looking to do something different. I wanted to test myself, having turned things around for corporates half a dozen times, wanted to have a crack at it myself.
So you were the business sponsor of a Salesforce implementation. Was that your first exposure to Salesforce?
Yeah, it was. So that was sort of 2012 type area, and they'd had like 3 or 4 different cracks at a CRM for that area, and we had to get it right from a compliance point of view for do not call register. So that was critical, and that was the initial ROI, and then we just kept adding on and on and on. And, we had in that area of the small medium business division, we had the worst customer ENPS. We were so good. We had the highest churn levels. We had the most errors. We were the bottom of the bottom in the company, and the CEO, a guy called Kevin Russell, who's a good mate, just used to give it to me, saying, oh, you guys you're a basket case. And slowly we turned that around, and we became the best internally and tried to, really grow that division well. And all of those metrics over a period of 2 years. And some of that, absolutely grateful for what we did with Salesforce, because we cut the error rates. We gave customers a lot better solution. We were taking out like mortgage documents for them to sign. And if we had to change, a mobile device or a PBX, then we'd have to go back, and it was so, inefficient. So we, digitized that whole front line. And then we went down the journey, the value chain, if you like, to service, and helped out there with better case study, better, case management, etc. So all of our key indicators in that division over a 2-3 year period, like the from to story, was just out of control. And that led me at one point, when I knew I was coming to Sqware Peg, to speak at Dreamforce, which was pretty cool to be doing, on the client side. And that was the first time I went to Dreamforce in 2015, just before I started officially at Sqware Peg. So, yeah, pretty amazing little story.
Because Sqware Peg did the implementation, right? So that was your, I guess, first exposure to Salesforce, but then also first exposure to Sqware Peg, and then the opportunity kind of just aligned. Like, how did that kind of all fall into place that you were like, right, I'm gonna, I guess, put myself into a fully focused Salesforce role, but also, back myself to go from being in telecoms to now a professional services managing director in a Salesforce partner?
Yeah, I didn't have any consultancy experience, so let's be clear on that. But it wasn't like my decision making around it. I think I said to Sean Stillwell back at March at a dinner, I said, "Oh, I'm getting itchy feet. I want to do something different." And he said, "Oh, you'd be great. Why don't you come and, run something like this?" And that started a whole conversation over a period of months. And we'd go and have a dinner and go and have a chat. And I was looking at a couple of other things at the time. And I got some advice how, make sure whatever you do something where you can have an immediate impact. You can make a difference, and that you're, going to enjoy it. And for me, my decision making it's definitely got to be cloud based. I worked in some dinosaurs before, like in the print industry where online came through, and I didn't want to work in call it, jargon, but a sunset business. I wanted to work in something that was very much growth orientated, a lot easier to do good things if you're doing that. So it was definitely going to be cloud. And then I thought, well, I'd be crazy, not to leverage the learnings over the last couple of years of Salesforce. And I've never been that technical, but I knew enough about it to be dangerous in a way. And it was more coming from the transformation we'd done at Optus, which we still use years and years later as a case study of, and I used some of the lessons we learn about change management and things like that to the clients, helping mentor other people on that transformation. But I think the big thing was that Sean was willing to give us a go at, being an owner of the business. And that's where, I invested some money into the business. And that was like a buy and earn in. So basically, it was like grow the business, double the size of the business, and we get to like a equal partnership. And that's what we did in a matter of really 3 years. So, Sqware Peg was a really solid business, first Salesforce partner in Australia. It had a great skeleton, but it just needed a lot of love and attention. And it was really flatlining, not quite on life support, but it was flatlining at the time because Sean didn't have the energy, or he was invested in other ISVs at the time. And there was a bunch of really smart people there doing some good things, but it was time for a refresh, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it came about.
And you mentioned like metrics and like I guess performance indicators in the world of telecoms. Like you were moving into a consulting role, like you said, you didn't have consulting experience before, but you were the managing director, right? So it was kind of I guess learn as you go, find your feet, but deliver quickly because you've got goals to hit and a business to run. So what did you identify to be like the kind of key areas of focus as a managing director in consulting, and the kind of metrics that you were all over, you paid most attention to?
Yeah, well, when I saw that question come through, this is for those people listening, I'll read it out, but this was the go-to book at the time and still is a gun book. So this is Managing the Professional Service Firm by a guy called David Meister. It's still a gun book. And one of my mates who I still work with, I was on a board meeting with him yesterday, in a meat company, which is totally different to Salesforce, but that's a whole nother story. But he gave me that book and said, look, if you're getting into professional services, you need to go and read that book. So I did. And then luckily I had Libby somehow turned up at Sqware Peg a month before I did. And she had a management consulting experience. So she knew things like utilization, which I didn't at the time, but I learned very quickly. But the big ones that I really found out, and this is probably in order of what sort of, everybody has a good plan until they get punched in the face. So the first one was cash flow. Like in those, and not just in the first couple of months, but in those early years, like Mark Lauder, who, bless him, was our finance director and is still involved in the organisation. But just won a shout out to Mark because he just won the world championship for over 65 in overall in ski jump and tricks and slalom. So he's been on that journey for a long time, but he just won the world championship for overall, and he's a freak. But anyway, he was doing daily cash flows. And we were just scraping around, and I think 2 months in, like I invested like 200,000 or something into the business just because of cash flow timing. So cash flow was the biggest thing in profitability. That was like a real punch in the face. And I've been working like, the corporate land where it's like the zoo analogy. You're a lion in the zoo. You're going to get fed every day. You're fine. Your paycheck's going to get done versus you're in the jungle and you got to go hunt and get that food. So that analogy, I think I learned pretty quick that we're in the jungle and, our people need to get paid. And if we didn't have the money, then I was taking it out of our offset account and bang, okay, yep, payroll done. Let's go next month. And so that cash flow and profitability was the biggest lesson, even though I'd been working in small, medium business and hearing this for years about, oh yeah, cash flow is king and da, until you actually live and breathe that and have the stress of that and worrying about, it was only like 15, 20 people at the time, which is a lot of mouths to feed, but it started to, create stress. And so that was one key measure, more behind the scenes, and then utilization of, staff. There's so many different ways to measure that. And I won't go into that on this, but, I learned that game pretty quickly. And then the big thing in these businesses is, your pipeline and sales, which we might talk about at some point with what's going on in the industry at the moment, the ecosystem. But our customer concentration was really heavy. We had Toyota as a mainstream client. They'd obviously done some work with me out at Optus, which is probably their biggest project at the time. And then we had a spattering of other clients. So we really needed to diversify and have a range of different clients, and then get scaling the business. The other things super important, obviously people and customer satisfaction. So, yeah, they're probably 5 things off the top of my head. Some financial, some operational, and some just common sense stuff.
It amazes me now listening to you say that, because I remember like Dave and I came into your office and you talked us. This was really early on in like your Sqware Peg journey. Yep. And you were like, "This is our vision. This is where we're going to learn." Like it seemed like you had everything now down. Like you completely had it all together. And like you said, it was like even utilization at that point probably wasn't something you were that familiar with. So it's crazy that you were able to deliver so confidently where the business was going when you were still really finding your feet in consulting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it took us a while to get there, but Sean was a good mentor, and then the how, like, I think one of the questions you want to talk about is like what were the big decisions, and one of the decisions that probably, I say Libby and I because we did do everything together, and it was splitting the working on the business and in the business. So during the week we work in the business for our roles. Like Libby was a account or project manager out at Toyota early on, and then Saturday, Sunday it'd be on. We'd be in the office, not every weekend, but a lot. And so it was 24/7. And my family, I had kids, probably a bit older than what yours are now, your daughter, but it was on, and I was absent from the house, and we made that decision to split. working in the business and on the business. And I think that was a really good thing. But we had to work on the business and get to know it and then work on the strategy. And so, yeah, good feedback that we sounded like we had our act together. But we did a lot of good work earlier on around just making sure we did have a good strategy. What was our mission? What was our objectives? What was our strategy? And I suppose Libby had already introduced me to a article which I still use today, and have used in this meat company that I've been doing some work with this year, because they didn't really have a strategy. So I said, "There's only one article you need to read, and people can Google this, but the article is, are you sure you have a strategy?" And it was written by two Harvard professors, and Libby introduced it to me back in 2009, and we used that as a model throughout Optus. But very simple, 5 different areas of the strategy. You've got to make sure all of those all fit together, and then your mission, objectives, your values, and all those sort of things. So we worked on that on the weekends, and then we tested out with the team. And I think by the end of that first year, in probably just a couple of months in, we got the whole team together in December and tested that with them, and it sort of resonated, and we used that model, and then built on that operating rhythm into quarterly plans and things like that. But that was our checkpoint, and hopefully it's still being used today. So yeah, that planning side of it was super important.
Are there other, if you look back now, other like key decisions either in the early days or throughout the journey that you can pinpoint and be like, if I hadn't made that decision, then this could have gone a completely different way?
Yeah, there's probably a few. I think that it's all cliche stuff, but people, how we ran the business, one, getting to know the people. So I think 2 weeks in, every business is a people business, but like these consultancy businesses, they're the biggest asset. And if the businesses can spiral up really well, if it's all going good and, you've got a good brand and reputation and people want to join you, there's so many different options to work in industry, to work for other partners, to work for Salesforce, to work for other technology partners, things like that. Like a lot of the skills that people have are very transferable, and they're in demand. So unless you've got something, you can create something that people feel welcome and that they can contribute, and that they can see, that it's more than just turning up to do their job, you're going to lose people and you're going to have a high turnover, and then the business can spiral down. And, we've seen that over the years. Sometimes, unfortunately, um, it might be financial, it might be a leadership crisis, whatever it may be. But some of these businesses, they can bang, and then it's gone. And there's a few train wrecks over the years. So I suppose putting the people first was a key one, and building trust with the team. And so 2 weeks in, I can remember saying, well, hey, I did this exercise and it might be useful. And so like 3 p.m. on a Friday, no one's really been productive, let's face it. So I said, just go get a drink, and, I just want to give you an understanding of who I am. And I'd done this exercise about a life story type thing where you drew in a circle, and every 7 years you had a little wedge, and you had to draw a picture. And I was obviously a crap artist, but it was just telling a story about your life and big decisions in your life, big moments in your life. You're being vulnerable as a leader. And for me, one of the big things that happened was I lost my mum just before I was 18, last year of school. That was a major life thing. And, 30 odd years later, it has a big influence on me and how I operate because of the values that I got from both my parents. That turned into this whole thing of every Friday we'd have this town hall, and it'd be sharing what was going on in the business, giving shout outs to people. And then, people started to do presentations and PowerPoints on their life story. And some of them were fantastic, like Jim Bartlett,
I was going to
who
say,
was
Jim,
our
I'd heard about this. Yeah.
yeah, so Jim told he's needed 2 weeks to get done because he's had the most amazing life from, being a detective. He worked in the Bikie massacre out at Milpera. He worked in the Newcastle earthquakes. He worked in the Ivan Milat investigation. He was in the bomb squad. Like, he's had the most incredible life. And then he's so cluey and picked up Salesforce and, became so technically brilliant, but just very calm under pressure. Obviously, now you get it why, working in all those type of roles. But so he and Mark Loud were instrumental in the business earlier on, and they were a key part of that culture, as two stalwarts who I, often said kept the lights on, looking back on it. So that whole people first side of things and trying to create an environment of best idea wins, we didn't always do that. We had to make tough decisions at times, but we tried to create an environment where everybody could have a say in the business and we were open at least to listening. Hopefully that resonated with people. So that was one thing. I've talked about separating the business, the on and in the business type work. I think once we had that strategy, the next big step was changing our relationship with Salesforce. Sean will always describe it to me as it was a knife fight. Like, Salesforce, you got to watch your back, the AEs, they'll shaft you, this can happen. And I saw that over the years, occasionally. But overall, our relationship was very distant with Salesforce when I started back in October 2015. And very quickly, we realized that we needed to bring that together. And so that's now been the case. And, we were lucky enough to get Sarah at some point as a partner manager. And boy, oh boy, that's probably a key thing. And I can't thank Sarah enough for all the effort that he put in and others over the years that we've had. But he was a standout and still is a great guy and adds a lot of value to different businesses that have been lucky enough to have him. So for us, getting close to Salesforce and building that relationship with key executives that, there was a lot of executives who were there for their own reasons and, there's some good egos in Salesforce and it's about working with the people who can actually get stuff done.
Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things I think is as you grow as a Salesforce consulting business, you kind of have to reinvent yourself, right, at different scales because your projects get bigger, customers get bigger, you go up the tiers within Salesforce, so you're creating relationships with different people within Salesforce, but then also the complexity of everything is greater, right? Because when you're a small business, if you've got like say 10 staff and the directors of the business are still doing the sales, they're still holding the relationships with Salesforce, like what is the biggest challenge as you grow in terms of like that reinvention of, you have to now hire a sales team. You've got to put sales structure, sales methodologies, commission plans, all these things in place where you maybe didn't have to do that when you were dealing with SMB, where Sean and yourself were driving the relationships with Salesforce?
Yeah. Look, besides money, so I'll start there because we were growing that quickly that I could only fund so much, and Sean wasn't in a position with what went on health wise with his one of his kids when he moved to America, and he was really a silent partner if you like, but still helpful at a board level in those days. So I could only fund the business so far. So another part, just linking back to that last answer, was we decided to take some funding in Salesforce Ventures. Rob Keith was fantastic in helping us out doing that. And that gave us some benefits and gave us this VIP all access areas sort of pass, as I describe it, with Salesforce. But coming back to your question, I think those growth challenges, sales, yeah, absolutely. Like James Mackay, who was ex-Salesforce, who was our sales director for a number of years, was great. Now sort of running his own consultancy. He brought a lot of that process to it. I'd run sales teams, but I'm not a natural bag carrier, in the nicest way. But I knew all the metrics and different things like that. And then when Simplist acquired us as well, we took another step up with Kyle Hanagani came out and he eventually took over the sales team and he put another level of discipline in what we needed as we continued to grow. And then Ali Tennant, who's now at CloudWorks as well, she'd had 10 years experience in the ecosystem and knew delivery inside and out, but had this dual, ability to the back end on delivery and sales. So didn't get into overpromise territory, which, it never could happen from a salesperson. But so I think for us, sales was key as we were jumping from, mid-market up into real big enterprise that, as you got a bigger team, you really got to feed the team. You got to feed the machine, if you like. On the delivery side of things, as we scaled, you really need that next level of governance. And that, particularly in the last, if I was going back from 2020 in the emphasis days through to, the end of last year when I left the business, we got better and better and better at that. We had delivery managers and we had just a little bit more air cover and better governance in that particular area with systems and processes. And that's expected when you're doing big enterprise. I think we got a lot better as well at controlling the client relationship. As the clients get bigger, they get demanding, but in a different way. Small clients are sometimes the most demanding because they're emotionally connected to the business and they want everything for nothing. So I think sometimes a small end client is the most difficult client. Enterprise clients, sometimes, once they see, as I did at Optus, once you see the shiny new toy, you want to just add everything in the first phase. So how you do that structured phasing of a journey, which might have been sold as, oh, we can get this done in 6 months and do 5 clouds and it's going to be whiz bang and, just switch it on. Occasionally might happen. Then to, no, this is going to be a 2-year transformation and we need to do it in a structured way. And look, we can do the technology faster to change your processes and for your people to go through a change management. It probably needs to be over that time frame. And how much time have you as a division or leadership team got to actually invest in this? And what's the balance of what you're going to do on the softer side of things around all the change management to what we're going to do? So controlling the client relationship and doing that to protect profitability. And I think referencing back to Ali she had a good one around scope creep around it's easy to define the breadth, but the depth of what a client wants and getting that right in a statement of work was always a tricky one. And we had a tech client up in Brisbane that, really took full liberty in that space. And we ended up doing like $1 million extra work. It was like hard yakka. And, that's just sometimes very difficult unless you have absolutely everything nailed down. You can just keep going and going and going. It's like how long's a piece of string. So, I think the team got a lot better through those growth challenges. And then strategy wise as a business, referencing back to Saro, I think he came in and, gave Libby some honest advice one day and said, you guys are at risk of FOMO. You want to do everything, but you need to just focus. So Libby kept this phrase on us of, in those years of focus, not FOMO, just stick to the plan. Don't try and do everything because you're just going to get, just diluted in what you do. You won't execute well and you just can't do it with the resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the point you made about like the pulling in expertise, like you talked through that sales team journey, and like it appears like every time you were looking to take that step up, you needed someone that had done that before. So like Ali, as an example, 10 years of consulting sales experience. I think that's where the cash flow challenge comes in, right? Because you have to invest to see the reward. Like you have to get these people, because I think a lot of partners are when they are trying to bootstrap, they're trying to do it with the existing team they have and push into that next tier without necessarily having the experience that next tier requires.
Yeah, fair comment. And yeah, it costs money and, people were earning more in the business than what I was. Like, if the sales team got it right, they were killing it, which is great. But, everybody was important and we had different bonus schemes that we brought into the business and things like that. And then when we thought we were going to be on an exit path, we introduced, a couple of different things and tried to tie people in for longer. At the same time, we had some amazing talent in the business and, because we were growing, but like some of those have gone on to amazing journeys inside Salesforce and out. And that's probably one of the most pleasing things that you see in the whole experience.
Mm-hmm.
How you can impact someone's own career, and hopefully they've learned one or two lessons, and they've contributed a lot to that Sqware Peg and then Simplest journey. But you're helping them along their way as well.
Just one question that came to me just then when you were talking about, because you said you weren't technical. Obviously, you knew enough to be dangerous, but you're not from a Salesforce hands-on background. So like when you are looking at team members and rewarding those team members, like as someone if someone's listening to this saying, I really want to stand out to my managing director, I want to stand out to the directors of my business, like what was it that you looked for, like to say, right, this person's someone we need to keep, we need to reward? Like, is it the feedback you're getting from their manager? Is it the customer feedback? Is it just the general attitude that you're seeing around the place?
Yeah, I think combination of all of that. Like we tried to get more sophisticated in how we did reviews, and at different times had peer reviews and things like that, and client feedback. But when you got it from the client, like consistently, not just once, but like over a period of 6, 12 months, you might get it 3 or 4 times. Like, hey, that person, they're outstanding. And then the clients occasionally would, try and poach those people for their own team. But so client feedback above all, but you'd hear it from the team. And you see it in demos, like even though it wasn't technical, like you see it come to life, and you see someone perform when they're doing a demonstration of the solution live to the client, something they've built or they've mocked up, or things like that. So yeah, it's effort. I think the biggest, to answer your question specifically, focus on doing a great job initially yourself for the client, but then think about what else can you do for that practice if you're in a consultancy. Like, it was those people who said, a guy called Keegan Kopaz is a great example of this. Like, he was awesome at contributing above and beyond about improving the business. Sometimes he might put a little layer of governance in it too much, and it'd piss some of the rest of the team off in a nice way. But his heart was in it, and he was so genuine. And if I wanted honest feedback about how something had gone down or what we were thinking about, I know Keegan and say, yeah, no, that's good, that'll fit. Or he'd always come up with, oh, what about we do this, this, and this? So giving back to the practice, and that's a good value anyway in life. Give more than you take, and good things will happen to you. So I think in that way, everybody is looking out for themselves in, ecosystem roles and industry. But if you can be a team player, then, that's
100%. Now, this one's really big and a big juicy question, because it's kind of like you mentioned before, cash flow, getting the sales pipeline and projects right is like the lifeblood of a consulting firm. So if we look at, like, over the years, what you learned about getting the balance right between bench and pipeline, and I think this is probably one that has fluctuated a lot over the last few years, because, like, if we look at COVID times, everyone had, there was no bench, but people were hiring on the concept that there could be a project coming. And nowadays it's like, we won't hire until we get a project. So what is in your experience, the right way to manage that? Is there a ratio, like a perfect number of a balance between the two?
Yeah, look, I think in simple terms, unless people aren't billable 4 days a week at least, then you're dead. It's pretty simple. The hiring side of it, that's the art form and the timing of that. Like, you need at least a couple of weeks, really. And sometimes you don't get that, to bring someone into an organization to actually induct them well. And we got a whole lot better in how we inducted people over the years, from, early on it was just throw them out and sink or swim, to becoming more sophisticated, running them through how we did things and spending a whole day with them. And then, shadowing, getting to know the client, and then getting going. So I don't think there's other smaller rules around that in terms of bringing people into the business and how you get it right. The whole other part of your question around bench and pipelining, Simplest were very sophisticated in how they ran pipeline management, which was great, like looking out 3 months, making sure you had coverage, and we had a split role in that the sales leader would focus on that month and be accountable for closing, what's close one in Salesforce language that month. Just get it done, get it closed, hit the target. But we'd have someone looking 3 months out, different role, really focusing on that pipeline and the ratio. And they'd meet together usually with each AE and look out 3 months and try and get them to think a little bit beyond the current month deal that they were signing. And then, delivery accountable for revenue. So those three metrics were split up, and Simplest really they added a lot of value to our business, but across CPQ, managed services and advisory. But from the actual running the business operationally, that they were the core things that they brought, just tightening up. We were very similar in how we ran the business, but they were more professional in how they ran the pipeline and separated that out to ensure that somebody was looking 3 months out.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't have any holes. Easy to say, hard to do.
Yeah.
And that's where activity. And it's like, how micro do you want to manage your sales team? Like, you're measuring them on appointments and talking to AEs at Salesforce or new clients, or, what they've done if they're less mature, or you're giving them the opportunity to really manage that time themselves and balancing between what they've got to close this month, current clients, and looking at pipelining for future, which might be with current clients or net new clients. So that's so important in the business because you're relying, that's why the sales team is so critical, because you're relying on four, half a dozen people, and the rest of the business is following that. And I'm not one for putting up sales teams on podiums and all of that, but without that, it's vice versa as well. Without a great delivery team, you don't get a good reputation and all those. It's a yin and yang, but you need to deliver on the sales, otherwise people don't get fed. And you get to these positions where you have the tough decisions that if you don't win that next project, then X, Y, Z, who's going? How do we do that?
What about margin then? Because I know, especially in the market now, like people are getting squeezed. There's people coming in from offshore. There's costs are going up always, but prices seem to be, companies are coming in and offering crazy offshore prices and things just to try and win some work. And I being a salesperson myself, I know sometimes you think like a deal is better than no deal. But the long-term impact of a bad deal can be worse than no deal at all, right? Because if you've got resources tied up on lower margin projects, in the long run, that's going to impact the business. So when you were early days of Sqware Peg, I guess it would have probably been easier to say, right, let's just get deals in. Margin's important, but let's win some stuff. But then does it get easier to say no to bad business over time, or has it always been something that you've said, right, this is the line in the sand, we can't do bad business?
Well, ethically, I'd say that, but no, we really didn't. No, it was rare that we said no. Sometimes we did, where it had either got out of hand at a client where it was just a toxic environment for the people, and we had to make a stand. And we did that once or twice, but it was only a handful of times that we had that sort of a client. If they were that unreasonable that we couldn't, as executives, go and talk to them and say, hey, let's just walk in each other's shoes. Let's get a fair outcome here. What can we do? But I can remember actually when I announced that I was leaving, that one of the drink sessions we had, and I think it was with David Bowker actually, we went over just to cleanse ourselves of all probably the top 10 clients that we had over a period of 8 years, the ones that went wrong. And you're right, you get a bad client, it costs so much more. So we did have a rule of no red accounts. Let's just get that right. We got a lot better in that discipline. That when David Strangwood was tightening up the delivery area, he did a great job of that, making sure that we had the controllables in place with the gun delivery managers and project managers that we had at the time. So we were a lot better at the back end governance, so things didn't spiral and escalate into larger situations that required intervention. So yeah, not easy to get right, and there was plenty of times where I wish we didn't have done some deals, but there was other times where we just had to, because we were either looking for that next project to keep the team going, or we had to hit targets because we'd started confidentially a sales process, and it was game on, and that there's always some pressure coming. It's either cash flow or it's something else going on external to the business. So
Mm-hmm.
easy to say, but it's so much better to test out your clients and make sure their value set is similar to yours. But then when it comes down to the crunch of, the deal's there, that's different. Jumping back to your part of your question around offshore and, cheap rates and things like that, and how do you differentiate yourself and ensure that you're putting a quality foot forward? We were 100% onshore, and that was a differentiator. We were in the boutique category of firms earlier on, 2015 to, 2019 really, when we got acquired from Simplus, and then we started doing offshore, but through Simplus in the Philippines, and that was great. It was a higher, we'd had higher tenure of staff, average 7 years, really good people, and it took us a while to work out that ratio, but we had team leaders offshore. So there's no doubt offshore can be done really well, but I think there's a ratio in there, and it depends on the type of project. If you've got a really massive enterprise project, you can get it, some, consultancies can get it way above 50%, 60, 70%, but it's got to be a mega project, like millions and millions of dollars to do that. And if it's a smaller project, then you have less capability to do that. And, configuration versus customization in that, the dev definitely works, well from an offshore. But if you've got something where it's not out of the box, but it's more configuration versus customization or coding, then arguably, and that's what you should be doing all the time. But then so somewhere to a 50-50 ratio is great, but you might be, you've got to get to 30 to 40% to be profitable.
Hmm.
I think from an offshore ratio. So there's a few things that I learned over the years in that. And it just depends on the type of project, the type of industry, the client. But whatever you do with your offshore mix, you still got to deliver quality outcome. So, um, a lot of customers have gone for that cheap and cheerful high offshore ratio, and the old pay peanuts get monkeys, and it just
Yeah.
it doesn't work, and you end up doing a whole bunch of rework, and then you got to really think about the business transformation about, well, if this project gets delayed and it does, what's the burning platform that the client's trying to solve? What is it? Is it going to cost them 10 grand a week in terms of new revenue, cost savings, whatever it may be? But what's the dollar figure? What is it going to revenue or EBITDA? What's it going to cost them? And how can you actually help them to realize that you're the perfect partner to actually get this done in the time frame around the budget, because it's always going to be swings and roundabouts, and that's another art form in how to negotiate all of that. But you're going to deliver a quality outcome for them, which is going to meet their end objectives, which isn't just get the project done. It's the ongoing roadmap. It's taking them on that journey.
Now, you mentioned there around like when, as you were starting to have some conversations about that sales process and potentially an acquisition when you're at Sqware Peg, you've been through two now from in the Salesforce world. So I think you have a unique insight into this world. What's the process, first and foremost, that people might not understand, but also what do you think a company that's acquiring is looking for in the market, and what do companies that are being acquired need to kind of be aware of?
I'm going to give one answer, but there's many answers to this because it is diverse. And so if I start from the view as a seller and the process, first thing you got to understand is who is your buyer's universe. So if we just focus in on Salesforce consultancies, like, and what we've seen over the last 5 years, we've seen advertising agencies, we've seen consulting, large global consulting firms, we've seen accounting firms, we've seen other, like happened initially with us, other partners from different geographies. So who is it and what are they looking for? And in some of those cases, they might be looking for the business, but they may not be looking for you as the leadership team because they've got their leadership team. In the case of Simplest, they had done 5 acquisitions in the States before us. We were the first international one. And they were doing like, not, it's a bit harsh, but cut the head off and roll up into their organization. So they didn't really need, or they found other roles if the leaders were good or leading something else, but it was a different model. So you've got to understand who's your buyer universe. And then the second part of your question, what are they actually looking for? And is there a fit there? And is it going to work? Like, do you want to stay around for the business for 3-5 years and continue to go? Well, that might limit your buyer universe because some people may not want you to hang around. They might want you there for 6-12 months, but sayonara, thanks for coming. The other thing at a high level is the valuation method, depending on what your scale is and who the actual buyer is. And they might have a different view on the valuation method, depending on how they're getting valued. A company who's public might be looking for something on the profit line a hell of a lot more than on the top line revenue. And, everybody's going to be focused on your financials overall and your margins, but the nuances about how they're going to value, or is it that they want diverse customer base and not customer concentration, or they're really strong in one vertical and you're strong in one vertical, and so they're okay with higher customer concentration in that industry vertical. And so the more you can understand that buyer universe and each of those potential buyers and their rationale, the more you've got leverage if you're trying to negotiate because you're walking in their shoes. So, and then I think the last thing is not just about you, but for the team particularly, what's going to happen post deal? What does that integration look like? What does this success look like? And what is, when you get into a one or two, players, that's what is in it for your people? Because if your people leave, you're dead. Like yes, you might have got some money, but it's not successful. And that was one of the big reasons why I stuck around at Infosys, because we'd seen it time and time again. In terms of what had happened, way back to Cloud Sherpas and Accenture, and that one ended up going pretty well. But there was lots of others, without going into all of them, where big consultancy companies acquired smaller boutique players. Culture didn't fit, and it was just so. If you care about your team, then you're going to make sure that for them it's a positive outcome. Sometimes you're not going to have a say in that, and sometimes you can't control those uncontrollables without getting too, um, philosophical about it.
For sure. There's two questions that come to mind off the back of what you just said. The first one around how do you actually is there, for anyone that doesn't understand that process, is there like a middleman, like a company, like how do you then understand the business? Like, is it because they've obviously come to you for a reason? They think they understand your business to a degree, but so a lot of companies are like, okay, cool, yeah, buy us, great. But you're saying no, you actually need to understand the universe, their intentions. Is that done direct? Like, do you sit down in a room with the execs of another firm? Is that all back and forth like that?
It can be. Usually there's some form of advisor. Like if you're going through a sale process, you might use an advisor. And I know many who have, and that's great because it's another full-time job. So going back to working in the business versus on the business, you got to be ready to go 7 days a week, 24/7 if you're thinking about selling a practice, and you've got to separate it and make sure that you're still making the right decisions in the business, not with a 6-12 month time frame, but the same time frame, which might have been multi-year, 3 years, to what you've been doing all the way along, because there's no guarantee it's going to come off. And as soon as you think about that, then you're not making the right decision. So yes, there are advisors, and there's advisors in the Salesforce ecosystem. We didn't actually use anyone. We didn't make a conscious decision that we were going to sell the business. It just evolved, and that evolved from a relationship that we were lucky enough to build with, Simplest back in 2017. We went and visited their office in Salt Lake City in Utah before Dreamforce, in 2018 or 2017. And then I got to know Ryan Westwood, the CEO, and I was looking, because I, relatively new to consultancy, a couple of years in at that point. I built a relationship with a guy in the UK, and then I was building some relationships in the US. So small boutique firms, non-competitive from a geography point of view, and some of them we were working on projects together that were, more global in nature. And so Ryan became pretty keen that pretty quickly. They Simplest were thinking exactly the same as us, but they had 5 VCs behind them, and therefore could afford to put, not 5 hours of someone, but put 5 people full time onto solving that particular issue. So they had everything built inside Salesforce to run the practice. And Ryan's brother Isaac, who is the COO, was driving that internally with a bunch of really smart people. So that, for us, that's how it evolved, and this relationship. And then Simplest made a decision to go international after doing 5 domestic in the US. They were looking at, Canada, UK, and Australia, all English speaking, all good Salesforce countries. And then, chose Australia, and it had a lot of conversations with other partners as well, and then decided on us. And then Ryan and I kept talking, and then Ryan said, well, we'd like to do something. And I said, well, okay, I'll come over for a week. So I think we just made up an excuse that I was going to work on something in the US, and I flew over to Salt Lake City, and 2 people in the organisation knew about it, Libby and Mark, finance, and obviously Libby from a strategy point of view. And we worked our butts off for that week and somehow survived. And at one point I was eating cornflakes and Gatorade because I'd run out of milk, and then I'd ordered something, and like there were a lot of homeless people, unfortunately, in that area, and the delivery person just left my dinner outside the Airbnb, and the team at Simplest were just laughing at me because I said, why were you staying in that part of town? You know how it's very black and white in the States, good street, bad street. Yeah. Well, anyway, so I'm glad that I helped out someone homeless that night, but I was on cornflakes and Gatorade the next day.
Yeah.
But it was the most amazing week, and and keeping you calm and, with Sean flew in for a bit and keeping you calm in a pressure situation and doing the right thing was probably the learning that I take out of all of that. But I can jump into a bit more on the process side if you want.
No, I think that's a good summary of what it takes and what goes into it. Because I think a lot of people just, you hear, oh, this company's been acquired by this company, and that's all people see. And if they've not gone through an acquisition themselves, they don't really know the legwork that goes into it, but also the importance of these conversations not derailing BAU.
Yeah, and definitely like there's a huge amount of legal involved. There's a big prep in data room, having all your ducks lined up and being super honest and just having that all out, and then the whole negotiation process. But above all, there's timing and luck involved, but keeping things really quiet and confidential, and yeah, just operating to the values that have got you to that point are probably the tips and tricks. But happy to help anybody out, and have done in the past actually, who have been going through that process or want to bounce it around. And yeah, so that's a great thing about the ecosystem, that a lot of people help each other out, which you probably wouldn't think as competitors, but it's been great to be part of that and help other people out along their journey.
Yeah, and I know you have done that. I know you were on calls with other partners through COVID at the beginning where no one really knew what that would mean for the ecosystem and things like that. So you've gone through like interesting times in the Salesforce world, but you've been out of the ecosystem for a year or so now, right? So you've kind of seen the back end of the dip of COVID and coming into more challenging times. And that's kind of continued since you've been out. What advice do you have for other partners now, other consulting business owners that are they're going through these challenging moments where things aren't kind of as buoyant as they have been? Things are a little more dicey than we've seen over the years.
Yeah, no silver bullets on this one. And as I said to you before the call, Andrew France got us on a bit of a call with, I don't know, 15, 20 partners the other week, just trying to bounce around some ideas on this topic. Going back over your customer base, who you've worked with over the years, and seeing just, contact activity from your sales team. They've got to be on fire and just doing a lot of activity to mine that base. And there might be a nugget of gold in there. I think with the existing customers that you've got, how can you pull forward any work, or how can you create some urgency for the client? Or you don't want to get into one-off deals with them on lowering your price and hurting your margins, but how can you secure that future piece of work as early on in the process, either protecting it from another partner, because I'm sure it's getting more competitive, as you were talking about earlier, and then you've just got to have a really good hard look about, well, what can we do without? Are there fixed costs in the business that we don't really need before we have to start making the toughest decisions, which is about your people and your permanent staff? So yeah, there's no silver bullet in it. And I still bump into people in the ecosystem, but I'm definitely not that close to it at the moment. But yeah, it has been a challenging year, but I think just going back to basics and doing all the things well, and just focusing on activity and the right activity and what you're good at, and refresh that. Why is this consultancy going to be better than consultancy 1, 2, 3 or XYZ?
Mm-hmm.
What makes you stand out? But going back to your current clients and your all the clients you've ever worked with, that's got to be the starting point, and do that methodically.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of people forget that, right? Everyone's chasing something new, chasing new pipeline, new opportunity. It's like there could be, like you said, a nugget of gold in what you already have. What's the best piece of advice, whether that be running a business or not, but from your career, if you look back throughout your career, like if you think of the one thing that's kind of set you on the best path that you've ever been told or guided by?
Yeah, like unfortunately, one of my friends took his own life back in, one of my best friends, guy called Chris Wild, back in 2011, and that really shook me to the core. We knew he had depression, but we didn't see it coming. And we'd been mates since high school, best mates, played sport together, and so I use this phrase now, which is like, "Oh, what would Wildy do?" And he did a lot of crazy stuff, but just have a go is the principle. So you don't know unless you have a go. So whatever it is in life, you can spend a whole lot of emotion and energy working yourself up, getting anxious about something, or you can just go and do it. Just start.
Mm-hmm.
Just go start something, and don't think about the end result. Just go start it. Just start. Like you were saying, you just went for a run yesterday. Like, good, go.
Yeah.
Go. If you can't run, go for a walk. Then start to run a little bit using that sort of analogy. And then before you know it, you might get into running, 1K, 2K, 3K, whatever. But
Yeah.
it's starting, which is where people get a mental block, or they spend so much effort, particularly on new business side of things. I've built this business plan. I've been working on it for 6, 12 months. Well, that might be a whole lot of crap. Like, and the market might have changed before you get round to it. Like, get the principles right, but just go start something, like test it and then get going. And I know that's not my theory. That's been around for a long time about, test and retest and just keep going.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I always say to myself, oh, what would Wildy do?
Yeah, I love that.
And the older, I turned 50 last year, but the older I get, not that that's old at all, but is I just say yes. If someone says, yeah, do you want to go to this? Yeah,
Yeah.
done. I'm there. Somebody called us up last week and said, oh, my wife and I were going down to Tasmania and doing a 4-day walk on Maria Island. And I said to Janine, it's like 10 o'clock at night. And I said, yep, let's go. She said, yep. So next March, we're down there for 4 days. Like, lucky that we can do that. But, small example, not a business one, but yeah.
Yeah,
So
nice.
what would Wildy do?
I love that. Two more questions. This one is very topical at the moment, and you may have seen kind of the back end of things coming in before you left the ecosystem a year or so back. But obviously, AI is everywhere. Dreamforce. I know you've not been paying as much attention to LinkedIn this week as you would have a year or so back, but everyone's talking AI. But from a professional services perspective, specifically, like what impact do you think AI is going to have on Salesforce partners, consulting partners, not from a what they deliver perspective, but the internal functions and capabilities and I guess the longevity of professional services?
Well, the obvious one is for those who are more in the enterprise space where you're punching out tender after tender after tender. How can you use AI to build, what we all struggled with, which was a library of great tender responses for particular industries and all those questions, and get something automated using AI that you can punch out a 50-page response super quick and then have someone go over it versus the effort it used to take. That's an obvious one from an internal consulting point of view. It'll be really interesting over the next couple of years how that all plays out. I think up in the sales side of things, that's super interesting as well. Like AI over, our close lost, what we've actually done. We used to do a lot of analysis around that, and there were some gems or nuggets in there that, did come out, but that was maybe every 6 months, 12 months type process. But I think from an internal consulting point of view, using AI to look at where our highest win rates, what are we actually doing? And it's just a little bit more analysis around that and getting smarter in what you're doing, the old working smarter, not harder. So there's two examples for you, Ben.
So you're not worried that it's going to take over everyone's jobs?
Not really, no. I think there's always a need for having the human interaction to understand what a client's actually doing and to actually configure that software for what they want. Yeah, it'll change jobs and it will take out jobs in some industries. I'm not too sure because I haven't thought about it enough on the Salesforce consultancy space. But yeah, some of the things, yeah, AI will do, and it'll get things faster. But it might mean that we're doing implementations that used to take 6, 8 weeks in 3, 4 weeks. Well, gold. It doesn't mean that the profitability or the revenue of a consultancy slows down. It means that we're getting better, or people can do more with those phase 3 or 4 to 6 phases than what they might do phase 1 or phase 2 and then go, oh, that's it. And then how many clients are out there that haven't got something that's being optimized? Probably 80%. I don't know.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
where, there's an opportunity to get a lot smarter and probably working with Salesforce on that as, implementation times quicken up. That's a hypothesis made up on the spot, obviously, but who knows?
And what obviously yeah, like I said, been almost a year or around a year. So what's been keeping you busy, and what does the future hold for Reid?
Yeah, I wanted to have a good break from this Salesforce and the sort of doing sort of call it CEO type jobs. And that I just put myself out there to help a few people, and it's funny how the world sort of delivers. Like one of my best mates runs a pool construction business, as well as shops and servicing, and so totally different, um, but project based, and he was having a bit of a tough time. So I've been 3-4 days in that. Um, one day on the books and doing finance stuff and strategy, and then about 3 days a week. I finished up in middle of August, but on the tools. And as I was saying, for those folks, the hard hat, it's not
So
going to work,
digging
that visual.
pools.
Yeah, everything, the whole cycle. So, but good pools, high-end pools. I'm talking Point Piper, Vaucluse, Rose Bay, Bondi, all in the east. Which, if you live in Manly, is a good hour drive.
Yeah.
So up at 5:30 on the road by 6, on site by 7, tradie hours, work till 3:30, go for a swim, go for a run, do whatever. So I did that up until mid of August, just helping him out. And the good news is that business is back on track, and it's been the best thing I could have done. I wanted to do some volunteer work, and I was doing some work up on North Head, planting trees with real older people, and native nursery up there one day a week. But that's turned into my year of volunteering, helping people out. Besides that, yeah, I've joined the board of a meat company called RTC Foods, which I loosely knew some people, and I met them last year, and they wanted some help scaling their business. I obviously know nothing about meat except eating it, which is always good fun. And so that business, we've put a whole strategy into play over the last 6 months, and I've now officially joined the board, and looking forward to, that's a 3-5 year journey to really take that business to another level. It's a sizable business, um, and millions and millions of dollars. So that's super exciting to sort of take that on another trajectory. And then I think I think going into next year, I'm looking at a whole bunch of tech investments or advisory type work, some in the Salesforce space, helping a few people out. Probably going forward into next year. What that will be, I'm not too sure, but it's probably not a full-time gig for me doing a CEO gig again. I want to do a bit fingers in lots of different pies. So sort of work 2-3 days a week and have fun. And, I've been filling in my time with ultra marathons, as I was saying. Got back from running the Larapinta Trail, or part of it, sort of 115 kilometres in some of the most beautiful but hostile country, rocks and just heat and humidity out west of Alice Springs. So that was cool. And then next month, I'm doing the Bondi to Manly Ultra, which is 80 kilometres, which seems a long way, and it is, but following the coastline, which, I'd recommend to anybody in Sydney doing parts of that walk. They might have done the Spit to Manly, or, Bondi, Watson's Bay and around there, but it's beautiful coastline that we've got, and I don't think many people utilise it that much. But
How long will that take you?
I don't know exactly, but I'm hoping under 10 hours, but we'll see.
Wow.
The winners do it in like 6.5, crazy. And there's a team thing, so people are doing like 20 kilometres each, and then there's idiots like myself who are running the whole thing. So
Fair play.
somewhere hopefully under 10, but we'll see. And the good news is I don't have to walk too far home or crawl.
Yeah,
But
lucky it's
other
not
than
the
that,
other way.
spending a lot of time with the family, which has been great. So a bit of everything, but all I want to do going forward is just help people out. So that's my simple philosophy, sort of switching gears into a different style of work. And I've been lucky enough to do some good investments. The simplest team have gone again into a company called Fullcast, which is an ISV, which is, for big enterprise, looking at sales quotas and territory. So that's fullcast.com. So have a look at that if you're in that game. But super exciting. Ryan's got the crew back together, and they're going to do some amazing things in that space. So looking forward to being a small part of that journey too.
Yeah, nice. Well, I think people will be pleased to hear it's not the end of you in the ecosystem, and we'll be seeing more of you as we move into next year.
Yeah, I don't know what it'll be, but something. But it won't be full time. But happy to help people out here and there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've loved hearing more from you and your journey, and just getting some really good advice for people going through a similar path. So thank you so much. If anyone does want to reach out and just pick your brains or ask any direct questions, where's the best place to find you?
Reid Meldrum #4 @gmail.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Reid.